dawning upon us, the era of giant monsters. I'm not kidding, just look at the phenomenal success of Godzilla Kong and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Luckily for you, the TV region always does its homework, so today I'm going to be educating you about the top 25 best giant movie monsters. Now, to the average simpleton, the name Bong Joon-ho would at best remind you of the Oscar-winning Parasite, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a pretty solid film. However, the true cinephiles of Korean cinema will also know this legendary director for films such as 2003's Memories of Murder and 2006's The Host. Yeah, this film really made waves all over the world, and I'm not just saying that because its monster is basically a mutated fish. Now, the CGI isn't exactly the best in this film, but it shouldn't take anything away from the fact that this monster is truly terrifying. It's not that easy to kill, and then it freaking swallows people and then spits them out only to eat them again later. The way this beast was first shown was a perfect demonstration of revelation leading straight into action. And then, of course, there's the grand finale where the fish monster actually ends up killing Park Gang-doo's daughter Hyun-seo. Sure, it also got killed by the end of this scene, but it made sure to take away a character we were rooting for in the entire film. See, this is why this beast lands in my list despite all the competition. Also, in case you're wondering if this monster actually has a name, it's Guomo. Yeah, The Host sounds like a much better name now, doesn't it? This one's actually a giant monster, and it also happens to be the perfect example of less is more. The Cloverfield monster, or as the production crew like to call it, Clover, was a menacing threat who was definitely on an apocalyptic level, so I'm not too sure if it could be taken down in its own franchise. Like, sure, if you were to call Godzilla to the party to launch his atomic breath, then I don't think any beast would stand a chance, but Clover is in a universe of his own, so we shouldn't be treating him like a Muto. The main reason why I was so tempted to include this vicious monster here was due to the fact that he isn't really seen in his entirety. It's all about the tease, and it makes the final reveal a whole lot better, especially because seeing him essentially confirms that even military-grade weapons aren't going to do much to hurt him. Also, just for clarity, I know there are some weird monsters moving forward with this franchise, but this entry is only about Clover and no one else. Those dudes don't even deserve to be put on the same level as Zuko. At least this little monkey proved to make a difference in the final matchup of his film.
Oh! Oh no!
Yes, this dude was a super tough opponent, especially when you consider the fact that Godzilla needed a helping hand to defeat him in the only film appearance he's made till date. Space Godzilla is a deadly monster, primarily because of the fact he's essentially a Godzilla clone, but with space boosters. I mean, the dude can choose from an array of psychic powers and energy attacks, along with his ability to form and use crystals in various ways. That's a lot more ammo than the King of the Monsters, and if you look at 1994's Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, you'll know why I'm saying this. Imagine fighting a giant monster who also has the same abilities as Charles Xavier. Now that's no walk in the park. I'm not trying to be mean because Professor X is in a wheelchair. Not only did this beast defeat Godzilla in their first encounter, he only went down later when the King of the Monsters called upon Moguera for help. And that just goes to show how big of a deal this kaiju is, which is why I'd really love to see him make an appearance in the Monsterverse. Yeah, I know that's a tough task, but a fan can dream, right? I'm not too sure how many remember this particular unit, but let me tell you something. Slattern was easily the most powerful kaiju that humanity ever came across in the Pacific Rim universe. Yep, I know there was a mega kaiju in the sequel, but that dude was a combination of 3, so I'm going to stick to my statement. Now this bad boy was the first ever Category 5 kaiju that the team came across, so everyone knew it was going to be a tough battle. Gypsy Danger and Striker Eureka may have been together for this fight, but they realized they were out of their league pretty soon, which was why Stacker decided to sacrifice himself with the self-destruction. However, Slattern was so powerful that even a literal explosion couldn't finish him off. I'm really upset that the creators didn't give us a full-on battle scene here, because can you even imagine how epic that would have been? Also, the dude's creature design is pretty sick, especially with the way his tail is structured. Oh yeah, and I know Guillermo del Toro likes to say that he didn't take inspiration from Neon Genesis Evangelion for this movie, but he did admit to using Chernobog from Fantasia as an inspiration for Slattern's imposing size. I don't know if you've watched 2010's Troll Hunter, but here's a word of advice. Make sure you check it out. This is a monster flick that manages to make use of its human characters much more efficiently than other creature feature flicks out there. Of course, judging by its name, you can safely assume that the monster in question here is a mountain troll, and he happens to be called Jotnar. On top of that, the bad boy is injected with rabies, which only makes him super hostile towards anyone who comes near him. The main weakness this monster had was UV light, which eventually helped the hero Hans defeat him in the grand finale of the movie, even though it wasn't like an easy victory, because he had to go through all that trouble just to make the UV rocket. Look, I know the beast looks a little odd with that funny nose of his, but make no mistake, there's not a chance in the world that anyone in their right minds would want to come across a monster as big and deadly as Jotnar. His size of 61 meters tall makes him one of the largest troll monsters in cinematic history, right alongside the cave troll from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. First of all, I just want to shout out this movie because people don't really give it as much love as it deserves. 27's The Mist is not only a strong adaptation of Stephen King's monstrous creativity, it also gave us some of the scariest monsters ever to grace the big screen. Sure, some of the CGI may not have aged well, but if you compare it to most of the modern stuff that's put out, I'd say it finds itself somewhere in the upper echelon. Now, if I want to talk about the giant monster in this film, it only makes an appearance towards the end of the film, but also leaves a lasting impact. Yep, I'm talking about the behemoth that towers over everything else in this film and also has an imposing creature design. It's also known as the impossibly tall creature, and the funny part is that it doesn't exactly come across as hostile when we get to see it. Well, that may boil down to the fact that it's so freaking huge that it can't really notice anything beneath it. Even so, the behemoth's presents a huge hazard to everyone around it, and its spooky appearance in the middle of the mist was impressively executed. Okay, now this one's an oddball because I've included the same monster from two different movies that also happen to share the same names. Well, let me break it down for you. I'm referring to the huge and scary Kraken, which is kind of the main threat in both the Clash of the Titan films. The reason I'm including both renditions is because the 2010 version of the film was essentially a soft reboot to the 1981 version. Also, I'd never ignore an OG beast, so it would have been wrong for me to avoid talking about the tentacled beast from the 80s. Now, when it comes to his origin story, it's pretty much the same for both versions of the giant monster. He was born from the Titans named Oceanus and Ceto, both of whom were entities of the sea. The Kraken's tentacles are large enough to be able to pull entire ships under the water and destroy cities without even breaking a sweat. The beast also possesses enough endurance to match his strength. In addition to tentacles, he's armed with a gaping maw full of many sharp teeth. His numerous tentacles allowed him great speed in swimming as well. Now, I could go on about him, but I just want to say that he's one of the most badass creatures to ever been shown. And yeah, I want to shout out his brief appearance in the 2010 version of the film because the entrance itself was worth my movie ticket. Okay, so we've got another Kraken here, but this time the Lovecraftian beast is from the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie. I think what really works for this beast is the fact that his appearance in itself took up an entire sequence. We're primarily engaging with the giant monster through its tentacles, which look deadly enough on their own. Jack Sparrow, sure as heck, wasn't expecting to come across such a brutal monster, but hey, at least he went down fighting, right? While I'll admit that the 2010 Kraken from Clash of the Titans looked a lot cooler, there's no denying the fact that this Kraken had a scarier appearance. The direction was perfect because we got to see a build-up right until the grand reveal with those massive teeth and questionable breath. Got to give it to Davy Jones for being able to make this beast so obedient towards him that his own nickname got based on it. Of course, we all know that he meets his end in the next film under the orders of Lord Cutler Beckett, but I'm just going to ignore that for now because this monster really left a lasting impression on me.
Also that. Hello, Beastie.
If I use the term Rodan for a kaiju, you must be imagining that deadly firebird from Godzilla King of the Monsters. Now, I'm not blaming you for not knowing this, but the real deal came all the way back in 1956 when the kaiju got his own movie. Yeah, imagine that. This is the same pesky beast who switched loyalties faster than Elon Musk's net worth drops. Now, that's not to say he's useless as a monster, because if you watch the OG flick, you know exactly how much of a threat he really is. We already got a glimpse of it in King of the Monsters when we saw Rodan messing around with those fighter jets. But I just want to tell you once again that you should watch the 1956 film because you get to see how the sonic waves and windstorms from his wings are strong enough to lay waste to an entire city. Just think about it. The original Godzilla film came out only 2 years before this one, which goes on to show how much faith the creators had in this creature to go out there and announce his arrival to the world. This is easily the nastiest monster to have ever shown his face in the OG Star Wars trilogy. The Rancor is a terrifying beast with an ugly face and a deadly appetite. The way they kept him hidden from plain view in itself spoke volumes about how dangerous this monster really is. Now look, it was obvious that Luke Skywalker wasn't going to get beaten by the one that Jabba the Hutt was keeping locked up, but even then, we did get to see the Rancor consume one of the Gamorrean guards before Luke decided to prove that he was the real star of the movie. Also, I think it was kind of sweet that Jabba the Hutt got so upset over seeing what Luke did to his trusted pet. It showed that he valued the monster as something much more than a threat to use against the people who displease him. Also, here's some film trivia for you. The concept for the Rancor was described by its creators as a cross between a bear and a potato. As a matter of fact, George Lucas requested himself for the Rancor to be the best Godzilla-like monster to ever be created. Yeah, those are some pretty big shoes to fill. Now, before all the feminists come and attack me in the comments, okay, let me be very clear. I don't endorse women being called monsters. After all, they're better off in the kitchen anyway. Sorry, I'm joking. I think I'm in my Patrick Bateman era right now. Anyway, the movie does describe the lead, Nancy Archer, as a monster who terrorizes her city, so she has to be treated equally with all the other monsters I'm covering today. 1958's Attack of the 50-Foot Woman was a surprising move, because while there were a few other sci-fi films with gigantic humans serving as the monsters, this one had a female as its protagonist. Basically, the Monster Woman achieves her size due to radiation exposure from an alien kidnapping, which isn't good news because she's already got drinking issues and an unfaithful husband to deal with. I think you can see where this is heading, right? And while she meets a tragic end, she does manage to wreak havoc long enough for her to qualify as a monster. Plus, back in the day, if a gun wasn't able to harm you, then you're already an S-tier creature in the eyes of the police. Moral of the story, don't cheat on your wife if there's news of aliens roaming around your area. I did mention Lord of the Rings earlier when I was talking about troll monsters, so it would have been a fool not to talk about the epic beasts that we get to see in this epic trilogy. Now, when it comes to giant monsters, I feel I have to mention the Watcher in the Water, even though it doesn't really have a detailed appearance. Now, Tolkien didn't really write a lot about this creature, so there's a lot that's been left to speculation, especially regarding its origins. Of course, it's been compared to Lovecraftian beasts such as the Kraken and Skylar, but Peter Jackson decided to go his own way in 2001's Fellowship of the Ring. In his adaptation, the Watcher in the Water is portrayed as a colossal monster that somewhat resembles an octopus. Jackson stated in the commentaries that the original idea was to have the Watcher drag Bill the pony, who was carrying the party's baggage underwater. He also said that this was an extremely difficult creature to design due to the fact that Tolkien had written so little about it. Even so, I personally found it to be quite the highlight in an already impressive movie. Even if you've never heard of this movie, I'm sure you wouldn't mind me placing a Hydra dragon this high up my list. Jason and the Argonauts is a pretty old film, so don't expect to see a beast that's on King Ghidorah's level, but even then, I'd say the Hydra dragon's creature design is pretty on point, especially considering there's no CGI and only practical effects in this film. Now, the titular hero does end up defeating the dragon, but it was presented as a final boss and lived up to its reputation when it ended Augustus. Also, if the children of your teeth happen to be an army of skeletons, then you're definitely an S-tier monster. Sure, there are other monsters in this film as well, such as the gigantic bronze statue of Talos, but yeah, I don't think anyone's ever going to match up to a freaking Hydra. My only issue with the beast is that it isn't shown for long enough, but I guess that's understandable with all the budget constraints and logistics involving the practical effects. Yes, I'm gonna go ahead with the OG Mecha Godzilla from 1974 and not the robotic manifestation of King Ghidorah's vengeance from Godzilla vs. Kong. Now, the reason for this is pretty simple. The 1974 version is an actual character in the movie and not some last moment thrill which only serves one purpose, to show Kong and Godzilla teaming up against a common enemy. Now, the Mechagodzilla here has a better character design because he looks more like a robotic version of the King of the Monsters. We already know that he's made of super tough space titanium, but the beast is also considered to be an alien superpower, almost like an upgraded version of Space Godzilla, if you will. Basically, the whole idea of having him in the movie is to counter the natural juggernaut that is Godzilla, but at the end of the day, I think we can all safely say that we're much better off with the King of the Monsters than a destructive robot. Also, I know I shouldn't be saying this because of how it gets defeated, but I totally enjoyed the moment where Godzilla makes Mechagodzilla explode that electromagnetic field. This is a bit of an oddball because there's not one but two monsters over here who make their way into the TV Regent's history books. Let me introduce you to Sander, who's 30 meters tall and weighs 15,000 tons. Oh yeah, there's also Gaira, who's 25 meters tall and weighs 10,000 tons. Yep, that's a lot of mass between the two of them, but they kind of go hand in hand with each other, which is why I decided to include them both in this entry. Basically, the whole movie is about stopping these guys who are also referred to as Frankenstein's monsters from the Godzilla universe. There's also the fact that Gaira was born out of tissue matter from Sander with some plankton assistance. Either way, the battles between the both of them were epic enough to leave a lasting impression on us all, and even though I don't like the creature designs of some of the earlier entries, it's the relationship being shared between these two that wins my stamp of approval. Of course, it's not like there's anything romantic going on, but rather the fact that they're fight buddies. If I'm going to kick off my top 10, then I'm going to need a solid selection, and there aren't many that can top King Ghidorah. So I already mentioned Rodan getting his own solo flick, which is something that even Ben Affleck's Batman couldn't land, but if the side monster can get this much love, then the final boss was pretty much a done deal. We already saw the difference in powers between these two monsters earlier in Godzilla King of the Monsters, so you could say the same about his abilities in this movie as well, although it came out all the way back in 1964. Yes, people have always been a bit indifferent towards the monster designs from back then, but hey, I think he looks deadly, and the way he dominates the screen is on a whole other level. And just so you know, Ghidorah takes on Mothra, Godzilla and Rodan in the grand finale of this battle. Yeah, this is one of the few times where the King of the Monsters was made to look like a side character by a very capable villain. I know I declared Slattern to be the strongest ever kaiju in the Pacific Rim universe, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the best of the lot. After all, we've got Otachi, who's easily the most memorable kaiju from the franchise. Not only did she kick off what could be called the turning point in the film, she also happened to be a pretty badass operator when it comes to fighting Jaegers. Even in her battle against Gypsy Danger, she didn't just throw in the towel, she fought till her very last breath, and those wings towards the end totally took us all by surprise. It literally took a surprise sword attack to end the monster, which may sound anticlimactic but was executed to perfection. Like, this is a pretty useful and effective kaiju if you ever want to take down a bunch of giant robot fighters. Also, I'm not sure if people understand this, but Otachi was pregnant when she fought basically 3 Jaegers. That's a massive deal, because the pregnancy surely must have hindered her movements and stuff during the fight scenes. Man, I know she's supposed to be a deadly monster, but Otachi has my respect. Yeah, now I know this is a weird one, but you've got to give credit where it's due, especially if it happens to be a movie that revolutionized the world of science fiction all the way back in 1958. The Blob's a pretty simple creature. It eats and it grows, kind of like a puppy, but the main difference is that it doesn't stop growing even after it reaches a certain age. Now, it may not look scary or anything like that, but this monster is extremely hard to defeat, no matter what your technique might be. They thought of everything to stop him, even electrocution, but at the end of the day, it was the cold that took him down. However, when I say took him down, I only meant a peaceful slumber. There's no way a blob is going to be down that easily, which is why the eventual plan was to trap the monster in the Arctic. I mean, this kind of concept was refreshing to me, so imagine what it must have done to people of that era.
Not dead, is it?
No, it's not. Just frozen.
This was such a campy film, but I keep coming back to it for a lot of reasons, nostalgia being one of them. Another reason is the creature design of those sandworms. Not only are they massive and terrifying, these bad boys have the kind of intelligence that would make any college graduate question their existence. The best part is that the entire production process relied on practical effects, which is why these monsters looked and felt so real. The film wouldn't have the same kind of impact if these were just some CGI worms roaming around eating people, and that's exactly why I'll always prefer older films and appreciate such monsters. Just look at them go! They were outsmarting fully grown human beings, and not the dumb kind either. Well, okay, maybe a couple of them weren't exactly the brightest bulbs on the planet, but you get my point, don't you? It's their speed and precision that makes them stand out, and of course, if you're hiding under the ground, you've got the best possible advantage against Homo sapiens.
I can think of the most harmless thing.
Something I loved from my childhood.
Okay, this dude may not look like a monster, but trust me, that's the main reason why he's so high up on this list. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is an iconic villain from 1984's Ghostbusters because he's essentially a new costume for Gozer to wear and terrorize the city. The sheer size of the Marshmallow Man is enough to probably draw comparisons with Godzilla himself, and the fact that he has this odd smile on his face while wreaking havoc really creeps me out. Yeah, I mean, he does get defeated by our trusted Ghostbusters thanks to their proton energy streams at the dimensional gate, but man, it really was a hectic sequence. The funny thing in the middle of all this is that the Marshmallow Man only became a thing because Gozer could sense Ray recalling a corporate mascot from his childhood. It was actually a pretty random thing to do if you look at it in hindsight, but who cares? We got an amazing monster out of it. I think by now you've realised that if I'm talking about any of Godzilla's kaijus, then I'm only referring to their OG versions. When it comes to Mothra, I think it's safe to say that she's the second most popular kaiju in the franchise, only behind the King of the Monsters himself. I mean, she's got her own trilogy of films too, and that's when you know you've made it in Japan. Anyway, her 1961 flick was oddly calm and not as destructive as any of the other kaiju movies that had come out around that time. Mothra herself isn't exactly known to be a fighting enthusiast, but man, I've got to give props to whoever designed her because she looks beautiful. Trust me, this is coming from a dude who absolutely hates insects, so it only goes on to show how amazing Mothra is. In the movie, she doesn't do anything that would be considered kaiju-level violence, but yeah, she does end up saving the Shobijin girls from Nelson, so she totally qualifies as a hero. Imagine coming face to face with a giant prehistoric turtle with tusks, who's just been awakened thanks to an atomic bomb exploding in the Arctic. Yep, that's Gamera for you in a nutshell, but it still doesn't quite explain how deadly this kaiju is. This dude has no chill at all, right from when he awakens. Like, bro sets out to destroy an expedition ship not too long after waking up, and then goes to a military rig and assaults it in full flow. Plus the fact that fuel and atomic bombs only give him more energy makes Gamera a formidable opponent against any other kind of monster. Imagine the only way the humans could get rid of him was by luring him into a rocket and sending him off to Mars. I wonder if Elon Musk ever got a chance to meet him. You must have been waiting for this one to pop up somewhere, weren't you? Well, here he is at number 3, which I think is the most apt position for Destroyer. His origin story is freaking badass. Like, bro was born from the same oxygen destroyer that was used to end Godzilla back in 1954. Yeah, that bomb somehow revived some crustaceans and mutated them till they all merged into one single demonic monster that's overpowered to a completely different level. There's no questioning Destroyer's ability to destroy, as he was almost about to kill Godzilla in 1995's Godzilla vs. Destroyer, but then the Japanese forces decided to chime in with their cryo lasers, and even the King of the Monsters had reached meltdown mode by then. Man, I sure hope he shows up in the sequel to Godzilla Kong. Yep, King Kong is actually the oldest kaiju to have made its mark in the world of cinema, and it dates all the way back to 1933. Now, you must be thinking that this was a Japanese film, but no, the Americans were the first to make him popular, and it was only after the monumental success of the movie that they decided to bring him into the Godzilla universe as well. King Kong is easily the most popular monster out there because of how easily identifiable he is. I mean, let's not mince any words here. Bro is an oversized gorilla, so even the not-so-bright audience members would be able to relate to this beast. Of course, the film was quite the hit as well, which is why he would eventually go on to become a household name, especially now in the modern world. Here's the thing, most of the monsters that I covered earlier are related to Godzilla in some way or the other, so it only makes sense to have him grace the top of this list. It wasn't even a competition by any stretch of the imagination. Bro has been defeating monsters for generations, and he keeps finding favour with global audiences consistently. Now, I'm aware that he's currently popular with everyone due to the Monsterverse, but I just have to bring our attention to the 1954 film with his OG version, because that dude was the one who started it all in the first place. If that movie hadn't worked out, then we wouldn't have had such a legacy to celebrate now. He's the king of the monsters for a reason, and I can say without a doubt that you can agree with me when I say that Godzilla is the most badass beast to have ever been depicted on the big screen. Hope you liked my video. Please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video I know you're going to enjoy.